It was a warm Thursday afternoon in a quiet part of Los Angeles. Birds were chirping, and the sun was shining gently over the rooftops. People were going about their day, walking their dogs, watering their plants, or chatting with neighbors. It was just an ordinary day. But for 74-year-old Ethel Robinson, that day was about to change her life forever. Ethel was a small, gentle woman. Her hair was white like snow, and her face had the soft wrinkles of someone who had smiled a lot in her life. She wore a simple flower print dress and walked slowly with a silver walker. Even though she moved slowly, there was a kind of grace in how she stepped, like someone who had lived through many years but never lost her dignity. Every Thursday, Ethel went to the small corner store to buy a few groceries, bread, milk, maybe some fruit. She didn't have much money, but she always managed to buy what she needed. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. She was the sweet old lady who always smiled, said hello, and asked how you were doing. Some people even called her Grandma Ethel, even though she wasn't their grandma. She just had that warm, loving presence. On that Thursday, she left her little apartment around 2 p.m., wearing her favorite sun hat and holding her small brown purse. She greeted a few neighbors on the way and slowly made her way to the store. Just as she was about to cross the street near a bus stop, she heard loud voices coming from nearby. At first, she didn't pay much attention. People sometimes argued in public. It wasn't anything new. But the voices grew louder, angrier. Then she heard someone shout, "Get down! Don't move!" Followed by a deep voice yelling back, "I didn't do anything!" Curious and little worried, Ethel stopped near the edge of the sidewalk. She could see a young man, probably in his 20s, being pushed against a wall by two men in regular clothes. She couldn't tell they were police officers at first. They weren't wearing uniforms. One of them was tall and had sunglasses on. The other was bald and looked angry. The young man was confused, scared, and trying to explain something, but the two men weren't listening. A small group of people began to gather around. Some were taking out their phones. A woman whispered, "They didn't even show a badge." Another man said, "I think he didn't do anything. He was just walking by." Ethel felt nervous. She didn't like seeing people being treated badly, especially when they hadn't done anything wrong. She didn't know the whole story, but something didn't feel right. She carefully stepped forward, wanting to make sure everything was okay. She didn't raise her voice or point fingers. She simply said, "Excuse me, is everything all right?" One of the men, the bald one, turned sharply toward her. "Mind your own business, lady," he snapped. His voice was so loud and sharp that it made Ethel jump. She wasn't trying to cause trouble. She just cared. "I was only asking," she said softly. "He looked scared, that's all." Without warning, the officer took a step toward her. "Back off," he shouted, pushing her shoulder roughly with his hand. Ethel stumbled back. Her walker slipped on the edge of the sidewalk. She lost her balance and fell sideways, hitting the ground hard. Her purse flew out of her hand, and she cried out in pain. The crowd gasped. A young woman screamed, "You pushed her! What are you doing?" The other officer looked surprised but didn't say anything. The bald officer muttered, "She should have stayed out of it," and turned back to the young man they were holding. Ethel lay on the ground, struggling to move. Her wrist hurt terribly and her ribs ached. She was scared, confused, and humiliated. This wasn't just a fall. It was a moment that broke her heart. How could someone in power treat her like that? What had she done wrong? Just asked a question? Someone in the crowd started recording with their phone. Others were already calling 911. A man in a red hoodie ran to Ethel and gently helped her sit up. "Don't move too much, ma'am," he said. "Help is coming." The officers finally stepped back, looking uncomfortable as more people gathered. Someone shouted, "We've got it all on camera." Another yelled, "You hurt an old woman for nothing." Ethel's eyes filled with tears. Not just from pain, but from shock. All her life she had believed in respect. Respect for the law, for others, for elders. Now she felt invisible, tossed aside like she didn't matter. Her hands trembled as the paramedics arrived and carefully lifted her onto a stretcher. The ambulance doors closed. People outside were still shouting. The video had already been uploaded to social media. Within minutes, it was being shared and viewed by thousands. Then, millions. The clip was only about 30 seconds long, but it showed everything. Ethel asking a simple question. The officer pushing her, and her falling hard to the ground. In another part of the city, Mike Tyson was sitting in his living room watching TV with the volume low. He had just finished a workout and was scrolling through his phone when he came across the video. At first he thought it was just another upsetting news clip, but when he watched it, something inside him changed. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. He rewound the video and watched it again. Then again. The sight of an elderly woman being shoved and hurt. It made his chest tighten with rage. This wasn't just about violence. This was about disrespect. About someone with power using it the wrong way. Mike had seen a lot of pain in his life. He had caused some of it too. But now, he lived differently. He had learned from his mistakes. And seeing that woman on the ground, it hit him hard. He whispered, "That could be my mother. That could be anyone's grandmother." Without thinking twice, Mike grabbed his car keys and walked out the door. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew he had to be there. He had to make sure Ethel was okay. He had to stand up for her, and for every person who felt helpless and hurt. Traffic was heavy, but Mike drove fast. The video had shown the name of a store in the background, and he knew the neighborhood well. When he arrived, a crowd was still gathered. Police were there too, but the mood was tense. People were angry, shouting at the officers, showing them the video, demanding answers. Mike Tyson stepped out of his car and everything went quiet. People turned and stared. "Is that Mike Tyson?" someone whispered. The officers stiffened when they saw him. One of them tried to speak, but Mike raised a hand and walked straight toward the group. His face was serious. There was no smile, no jokes, just purpose. "Where is the lady?" he asked. "Where did they take her?" Someone pointed toward the hospital down the street. Mike didn't say another word. He got back in his car and drove to the hospital. He didn't care about security or rules. He walked in, asking for Ethel by name. At first the nurse didn't believe it was really him, but when she saw the worry on his face, she nodded and guided him to her room. Ethel was lying in bed, a bandage around her wrist, bruises on her arms. When she saw him, her eyes widened, in shock. "Are you Mike Tyson?" she asked in a soft voice. Mike nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I saw what happened. I'm here for you." And in that quiet hospital room, something powerful began. A moment that would soon shake the entire country. Because when a former champion steps in to defend a gentle old woman, it's not just about strength. It's about honor, justice, and doing what's right. And Mike Tyson was ready to fight, not with his fists, but with his heart. On that warm afternoon, after watching the shocking video of the old woman being pushed and hurt by the police, Mike Tyson felt something deep inside him rise like a storm. It wasn't just anger. It was a mix of sadness, protectiveness, and a fierce need for justice. Mike wasn't the kind of man to sit quietly when he saw someone being treated unfairly, especially someone as vulnerable as Ethel. So, without wasting any time, he grabbed his car keys and headed straight to the place where the incident had happened. When Mike arrived, the scene was tense. A small crowd had gathered near the corner store, the same place where Ethel had been hurt. People were talking loudly, some angry, others worried, but all of them united by shock. They had seen the video too. The police officers who had pushed Ethel were still there, but they seemed uneasy, as if they knew their actions had been seen and judged by the whole world. The officers were trying to keep control of the crowd, but it was clear that many people didn't trust them anymore, as Mike stepped out of his car, everyone's eyes turned toward him. The surprise was so strong you could almost hear it in the air. A former heavyweight champion, famous all over the world, standing calmly yet firmly right in the middle of the chaos. Some people whispered, "Is that really Mike Tyson?" Others just stared in awe. For many, Mike was a symbol, not just of strength, but of someone who could speak up when no one else would. Mike didn't waste time with greetings or introductions. He moved quickly, asking people where Ethel had been taken. Someone pointed to the ambulance that had driven away a few minutes earlier, then to the nearby hospital. Without hesitation, Mike got back in his car and sped toward the emergency room. Inside the hospital, Mike's presence caused a stir. Nurses and doctors recognized him immediately. But Mike wasn't there for autographs or photos. He was there for Ethel. He wanted to see her, to make sure she was safe, and to let her know she wasn't alone. The nurse led him down a quiet corridor to a small room where Ethel was lying on the bed. She looked fragile, but when she saw Mike, her eyes filled with surprise and something else, hope. Mike pulled up a chair beside her and took her hand gently. "Ethel, I'm here now," he said softly. "I saw what happened. You didn't deserve any of that." Ethel tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Instead, she squeezed his hand, grateful for the company and the kindness. Mike stayed with her for hours. He listened to her story, learning about her life, the struggles she had faced, and how she had always tried to be kind to everyone. He heard about how lonely she was since her husband had passed away, and how she had no family nearby to protect her. The more Mike listened, the more determined he became. This was not just about one moment or one woman. It was about something bigger, about justice, respect, and making sure no one else had to go through what Ethel did. Outside the hospital room, the video was already making waves across the internet. News channels picked up the story, and social media exploded with outrage. People shared the video millions of times. They talked about police brutality, about respect for elders, and about how someone as small and gentle as Ethel could be hurt so badly. Mike's name was mentioned everywhere, too. People were amazed that a man who once fought in the boxing ring was now fighting for an old woman's dignity. His fans, and even those who didn't follow boxing, were inspired by his courage to stand up for what was right. But Mike wasn't satisfied with just showing up. He knew that real change had to happen. So he began calling people, lawyers, community leaders, activists, anyone who could help. He wanted to make sure Ethel's case got the attention it deserved. At the same time, he was careful with the media. He gave interviews, but only when he was sure Ethel was comfortable with it. He spoke calmly but firmly about the need to hold those responsible accountable. He talked about how important it was to protect the elderly and vulnerable people in every community. Meanwhile, Ethel's health was slowly improving. The hospital staff said she was lucky. Her injuries were painful, but not life-threatening. Mike spent a lot of time with her, helping her eat, telling stories to make her laugh, and reminding her that she was stronger than she felt. People in the neighborhood heard about Mike's involvement and were amazed. They saw him as a protector, someone who cared deeply about their community. Some even offered to help Ethel, bringing her meals, offering rides, and checking on her every day. As days passed, Mike decided to invite Ethel to stay with him temporarily. He wanted to make sure she was safe and cared for while everything was being sorted out. Ethel hesitated at first. She wasn't used to living with anyone, especially someone famous like Mike Tyson. But she trusted him, and she knew she needed help. At Mike's home, Ethel found a new kind of family. Mike treated her with respect and kindness, making sure she had everything she needed. They spent evenings talking, watching old movies, and sharing memories. Mike learned about her favorite music and food, and Ethel discovered that Mike was more than a boxer. He was a man with a big heart. Their friendship grew stronger, and with it, so did the public's support. Stories about the incident appeared in newspapers and TV shows, often highlighting Mike's role as a defender of justice. People were moved by how he had chosen to use his fame to shine a light on an issue that many ignored. At the same time, pressure grew on the police department. Officials announced they would investigate the officers involved. Some community leaders demanded policy changes to prevent such incidents in the future. Mike stayed involved every step of the way. He attended community meetings, spoke at rallies, and continued to raise awareness. For him, it wasn't about fame or money. It was about doing what was right, standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Through all of this, Ethel found new strength. She realized that she was not alone, that her story mattered. And with Mike by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. This part of their journey was about more than just an old woman and a famous boxer. It was about hope, courage, and the power of kindness to change the world. The story of Ethel Robinson and Mike Tyson continued to spread far and wide, reaching people from all corners of the country. What had started as a quiet afternoon turned into a powerful movement. After the violent incident and Mike's immediate response, the next important chapter was about protecting Ethel and speaking out against injustice. Once Ethel had recovered enough from her injuries, Mike Tyson made sure she was not left alone or forgotten. He took her into his home to care for her personally. This was not an easy adjustment for either of them. Ethel had lived most of her life independently, used to her quiet routines. Suddenly, she found herself living with a former boxing champion, a man whose world was very different from hers. But despite their differences, the two found comfort in each other's company. Mike treated Ethel like family, making sure she was safe and comfortable. He cooked her favorite meals, made her laugh with stories from his past, and always listened carefully when she shared memories from her younger days. Ethel's smile slowly returned, and with it, her strength. She felt hope again, something she hadn't felt in a long time. At the same time, the story of the police's mistreatment of Ethel was getting more attention. The video that showed the shocking moment when Ethel was pushed and fell had been seen by millions. People were furious. Many took to social media to express their anger and demand justice. They used the hashtag #JusticeForEthel, and it quickly became a trending topic. Journalists and reporters reached out to Mike and Ethel. Mike, who had never been shy about speaking his mind, used every interview as a chance to raise awareness about police brutality, especially against the elderly and vulnerable. He spoke calmly but firmly, calling for change and respect. "We have to protect those who can't protect themselves," he said. Ethel is a symbol of something bigger. How our society treats its elders, its weakest members. Ethel, though shy at first, found her own voice. She agreed to share her story publicly. In quiet interviews, she spoke about how scared and humiliated she felt during and after the incident. She talked about her life, her hopes, and her pain. Many people were moved by her honesty and courage. She was no longer just a victim. She became a strong woman standing up for dignity and respect. Mike's involvement gave the case even more power. Because he was well known and respected, his support helped bring the issue to the front of public conversation. Community leaders, civil rights activists, and even politicians joined in, promising to push for changes in how police treated citizens, especially older adults. The police department could no longer ignore the growing storm. They announced that the officers involved were being placed on leave while an official investigation took place. For many, this was a small but important step toward accountability. Meanwhile, Mike didn't stop at speaking out. He connected with top civil rights lawyers who specialized in cases like Ethel's. Together, they prepared to file a lawsuit against the police department for the abuse she suffered. Mike stood by Ethel throughout this process, offering emotional support and helping her understand the legal steps. The lawsuit was more than a fight for money or punishment. It was a fight for respect and justice. It sent a message that no one, not even police officers, should use their power to hurt innocent people. and it showed that even an old woman with no family nearby could stand up and be heard. Outside the courtroom, people organized rallies and peaceful protests. Supporters carried signs that said things like, "Respect our elders," and "Justice for Ethel." Many of them were young people who saw in Ethel's story a lesson about fairness and humanity. The movement grew into a community effort to make sure this kind of abuse never happened again. Mike and Ethel also began visiting community centers and senior homes. They wanted to remind others that everyone deserves respect and protection. Mike often spoke about the importance of kindness, saying, "It doesn't matter how strong you are physically. Real strength is about standing up for others." Ethel, for her part, became a quiet but powerful symbol of courage. She was invited to speak at events where she encouraged people to stand up against injustice. Her words touched many hearts and inspired action. Throughout this time, the bond between Mike and Ethel grew stronger. They were no longer just protector and protected. They were friends who had found hope and healing in each other. Mike admired Ethel's strength and wisdom, and Ethel admired Mike's kindness and courage. Life began to take on a new meaning for both of them. They found joy in small moments, sharing a cup of tea, watching old movies, or just sitting together in silence. It was in these moments that the real story of their friendship was told. Two very different people brought together by fate, fighting for justice, kindness, and a better future. As the lawsuit moved forward and the public conversation deepened, it became clear that this story was about much more than one woman or one incident. It was about a community coming together, about a country facing hard truths, and about the power of one person's courage to inspire change. Mike Tyson and Ethel Robinson showed the world that sometimes the greatest fights aren't in the ring. They're in everyday life, standing up for what's right, protecting the vulnerable, and refusing to be silent in the face of injustice. The story of Ethel Robinson and Mike Tyson had grown into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. After the police mistreated Ethel and Mike stepped in to protect her, the world started paying attention. But the real challenge was just beginning. The fight for justice, respect, and change was about to enter a new phase, and both Ethel and Mike had to face many difficult moments ahead. After months of recovery, Ethel was still staying with Mike Tyson. They had become close friends, almost like family. Mike took care of her with great kindness, making sure she was comfortable and safe. Ethel, for her part, was grateful not only for the help, but also for the companionship. She had been lonely for a long time, and now she had someone who cared deeply about her. While Ethel was healing in Mike's home, the legal process was moving forward. The lawsuit against the police department was gaining attention. Lawyers prepared documents, met with witnesses, and gathered evidence to show what really happened that day. Mike used his fame and influence to bring attention to the case, ensuring it stayed in the public eye. But things were not easy. The police officers involved denied any wrongdoing. They claimed that Ethel had caused the problem or that the situation was more complicated than it seemed in the video. The police department tried to protect its image, saying the officers had been following procedure. This was a common defense, and it made the fight for justice even harder. Mike and Ethel understood that winning the case was about more than legal arguments. It was about changing how people thought about respect and power. Mike said many times, "It's about teaching everyone, especially those in power, that kindness and respect are not optional. They are necessary." Meanwhile, the community remained strongly behind them. More rallies were organized. People marched in the streets holding signs that called for fairness and accountability. Some of the marches were peaceful, filled with speeches and songs. Others were louder and more emotional, showing how deeply people cared about this issue. Ethel spoke at several events, her voice growing stronger each time. She told her story not as a victim, but as a survivor who wanted to make sure others would not suffer the same way. Her courage inspired many people to stand up and share their own stories of injustice. The media continued to follow the case closely. TV stations interviewed Mike and Ethel, showing the human side of the story behind the headlines. Reporters visited the neighborhood where the incident happened, talking to neighbors and business owners who had witnessed the event. The coverage helped keep public pressure on the police department and city officials. During this time, Mike also began working with local youth programs. He wanted to help young people understand the importance of respect and justice. He visited schools and community centers, sharing lessons from his own life. He told stories of his struggles and how he learned to change for the better. His message was simple but powerful. No matter where you come from, you can choose to do what is right. Ethel also became a symbol for elder rights. She met with organizations focused on protecting older adults from abuse. Together, they worked on new ideas and programs to keep elders safe in their homes and communities. Ethel's experience gave voice to a problem many people ignored: how often older people are vulnerable and overlooked. The case moved slowly through the legal system. Court hearings were scheduled, witnesses were called, and arguments were made. It was a long, exhausting process. Ethel found some days very difficult. Reliving the painful event in court was hard, but she kept going because she believed in the cause. Mike never left her side. He was there at every hearing, supporting her with quiet strength. His presence made a big difference, not just to Ethel, but also to the lawyers and everyone involved. People saw that this fight was real, and it mattered. As the trial approached, tension grew. The police department tried to negotiate a settlement to avoid a public trial. But Mike and Ethel refused to back down. They wanted the truth to be told, openly, so everyone could see what happened and learn from it. The day of the trial was a turning point. The courtroom was filled with reporters, supporters, and city officials. Mike and Ethel sat side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The lawyers presented their evidence clearly. They showed the video again, explaining what it revealed. Witnesses described how the officers had behaved that day. The police defense team argued hard, but the truth was clear. The judge and jury listened carefully. Many people outside the courtroom watched live news coverage, holding their breath as the trial unfolded. After several days, the jury reached a decision. The police officers were found responsible for using excessive force and violating Ethel's rights. The city was ordered to pay compensation to Ethel and to implement new training programs for officers to prevent similar incidents. The victory was more than just legal. It was a moment of hope. It showed that even one small woman, with the support of a determined friend, could stand up to powerful institutions and win. But the story did not end there. Mike and Ethel knew that the fight for justice was ongoing. They continued to work together to promote kindness, respect, and fairness. Their friendship remained strong, a shining example of how people from very different backgrounds can come together for a common cause. The impact of their journey was felt beyond their city. Other communities looked to their story as inspiration. Police departments in other areas began reviewing their policies. Citizens everywhere talked about the importance of standing up against injustice. Mike often said, "We all have a responsibility, not just to ourselves but to each other. When we see someone being treated unfairly, we must speak out. That's how we make the world better." Ethel agreed. She said, "I never thought I would be a voice for others, but now I know, no matter how small you are, your voice matters." Together they proved that courage and friendship can change even the hardest battles. And their story remains a powerful reminder that everyone deserves respect, kindness, and justice, no matter their age or situation. The story of Mike Tyson and Ethel Robinson had become well known not only in their city, but across the country. After the police abused Ethel and Mike rushed to her aid, they faced a long and difficult journey. But now, in this final part of their story, it was time to see the results of their courage, the changes that came because of their fight, and how their lives moved forward after everything they had been through. After the court ruled in favor of Ethel, It sent a strong message to everyone that abuse of power would not be tolerated. The city had to pay compensation to Ethel for the pain and suffering she had endured. But more important than the money was the promise of real change. The police department agreed to start new training programs to teach officers how to treat people with respect, especially the elderly and vulnerable. Mike Tyson and Ethel were proud of this victory, but they knew their work was far from over. Real change wasn't something that happened overnight. It required constant attention and effort. Mike used his platform as a famous athlete and public figure to keep talking about the issue. He appeared on talk shows, gave interviews, and spoke at public events. His message was clear. No one should ever be treated with cruelty. And it was everyone's job to stand up when they saw injustice. Ethel, too, had become a respected voice in the community. She continued to share her story and inspire others. Her courage gave hope to many who had been afraid to speak out about their own experiences. She worked with groups that helped protect seniors and educated people about elder abuse. Her efforts helped create new laws that made it easier to report abuse and get help quickly. At the same time, Mike and Ethel's friendship grew even stronger. They had been brought together by tragedy, but now they were family in the truest sense. They shared meals, stories, and quiet moments, supporting each other through life's challenges. Mike often said that taking care of Ethel had changed him, teaching him more about kindness and humanity than any boxing match ever could. The neighborhood where the incident happened also began to heal and change. The attention brought new resources to the community. Local organizations received funding to support elders and improve safety. Police officers were retrained to focus on respect and empathy. The people felt safer and more connected. But the most powerful change was the example Mike and Ethel set for others. Their story showed that no matter who you are, you can make a difference. It didn't matter if you were a world-famous athlete or an old woman living alone. What mattered was standing up for what was right, helping those in need, and never being silent when injustice happens. Their journey inspired many young people to get involved in their communities, to speak out against bullying and abuse, and to treat others with respect. Schools invited Mike to talk about courage and kindness. Ethel's story was shared in books and articles, reminding everyone of the power of resilience. Even years later, people remembered the day Mike Tyson stood up for Ethel Robinson. It became a symbol of hope, courage, and friendship. The story showed that when people come together, they can change the world, one small act of kindness at a time. Mike and Ethel's lives continued with new purpose. They traveled together to speak at events, met people from all walks of life, and worked tirelessly to promote justice and respect. Their bond remained unbreakable, a true testament to the strength found in compassion. This story is a reminder that heroes come in many forms. Sometimes, heroes are famous fighters like Mike Tyson, using their strength to protect others. Other times, heroes are quiet, brave souls like Ethel, who stand tall even when the world tries to knock them down. Together, they showed that kindness and courage can change even the darkest moments into a brighter future.